So Mark, what is Labour's current position on Gaza?
Well, first of all, we need an immediate ceasefire. The death and destruction is outrageous. All sides must comply with that ceasefire, and that means that Hamas, as well as the Israeli Defence Force, really should do something about that. I think it's very important that in the coming weeks and months that Hamas releases all of the hostages. And I think that whatever the outcome of the ICJ ruling, Israel should comply with that. And finally, settlement expansion and settler violence in the West Bank must stop.
Have you ever visited Gaza or the West Bank, and what was it like?
I have. I've visited Gaza and the West Bank on several occasions. When I first visited the West Bank, there was something like 50,000 so-called settlers. Nowadays, there are 500,000 to 600,000 settlers, and it's becoming very, very difficult to envisage how a two-state solution can be achieved when Israeli settlers have occupied so much land in that area.
Who do you think has the real power to affect change in the region?
I think the Americans have the main influence, although that is limited to some extent at the moment in the way that Joe Biden is being very cautious, because obviously he's looking over his shoulder at the elections which are due in November, when President Trump hopes to take office away from President Biden.
What can British MPs do to help resolve this issue?
Well, British MPs on their own, not a lot. The British government has some influence over the US and a less amount of influence over the Israeli government. The thing is that opposition MPs can show solidarity with the Palestinians and with problems that Israel and Palestine face at the moment. And that in itself gives an indication of what we might do should we come to office in a general election, hopefully sometime this year.
Can you explain what the implications for backing motions from your own or another party are?
Well, as I've just said, motions from any of the major political parties can give an indication of where they stand should our party in particular come to power later this year in an election. But that's it. It doesn't actually affect anything on the ground. And that is obviously the reality of the situation. Whichever way we vote will show our position, but we're not in government at the moment, but we hope to be later this year.
How do you respond to constituents who have been sending you emails since the Hamas attacks last October?
By giving them clear indications as I can on where I stand on the issue. The issue is quite complicated. It's gone on for many, many years. And in addition to responding in correspondence, I've also put a dedicated section of my website out there, particularly on the issue of Gaza and Israel.
What did you make of the events in Parliament on Wednesday?
Well, Wednesday's events were an opportunity for the SNP to try and embarrass the Labour Party for political gain north of the border in Scotland. And obviously, Conservatives were quite happy about that and therefore played along with the SNP by tabling their own amendment, which meant that the Speaker would have been under pressure not to take Labour's amendment. So Labour would have made clear its position without being pressurised from the SNP or from the government. That obviously did not happen because the Speaker, quite rightly in my view, broke precedent by making it such that all parties could express their view on the situation in Gaza. And obviously at that point, clearly the Conservatives were totally unhappy. It didn't go to plan, withdrew their amendment. And of course the SNP were furious that their opposition had been scuppered. But I think the Speaker did the right thing. I don't think he needed to apologise for his actions on the Thursday following. And therefore, I think this is still a very much live issue. But as I say, this won't affect what happens on the ground in Gaza, but it does give a clear indication of where Labour stands on this issue. And I think I've just given that now, obviously, in this interview.
Thank you so much.